Welcome to Moneyweb at Midday, the actuality news show, offering unique insights and in-depth analysis featuring South Africa's top business leaders, newsmakers, and analysts for today's professionals. Your host, Jeremy Maggs.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Moneyweb at Midday. In the next 30 minutes, I'll put some context around the numbers, perspective around the politics, some clarity around the choices facing us in South Africa. A warm welcome. I'm Jeremy Maggs. Coming up on the program today, why the credibility of an anti-corruption institution matters for investment and economic confidence. Government promises an Eskom-style rescue for South Africa's failing water systems. Will it work? Paper shortages and broken systems deepen the licensing nightmare for motorists, and unpaid university fees are locking local graduates out of jobs as South Africa starts to import more skills. It's Monday, the 27th of July. President Ramaphosa has accepted the immediate resignation of IDAC head Andrea Johnson following damaging questions about her conduct and leadership. Now, IDAC stands for the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption. It's a specialized unit within the South African National Prosecuting Authority. But I think the question today is, does the removal of one leader demonstrate that South Africa's anti-corruption system is working, or potentially expose deeper weaknesses in the very body created to pursue state capture cases? Someone who's applied his mind to that is Dr. Busani Ngwene, who's Director of the Centre for Public Policy and African Studies at the Johannesburg Business School. Busani, a very warm welcome to you. So the resignation, do you think it was done to protect IDAC or just to avoid the suspension and accountability process that was likely to follow? How are you reading this?
I think the resignation was meant to just avoid the humiliation of a suspension, which was imminent. It is absolutely impossible that the minister, the director of public prosecution, as well as the president, will have ignored the revelations from the Madlanga Commission recently. And to the extent that they will have seen what had happened, and there were already comments to the extent that there were meetings that had taken place between the NDPP, the minister, and the advocate Johnson, it is evident that the suspension was imminent. But I must state that she will not be able to avoid accountability at all, precisely because even former ministers like Beitele are currently before the Madlanga Commission. Therefore, there is no way that she could not continue to testify at the Madlanga Commission, because even civilians and former civil servants are actually accounting at the Madlanga Commission. But also we must note that already there are several complaints with the new ombuds of IDAC. There are reviews that are currently before court. There is a suggestion made that there is a possibility that the ad hoc committee might be either have been misled willingly, or that the information was not sufficiently provided to the ad hoc committee. Therefore, there will be there will be consequences for each of these revelations that have taken place.
On a broader scale, you suggest that her departure prevents further reputational damage. I've got to wonder, though, whether that damage has not already been done.
Well, it has been done. The damage has been done. So the advocate, Motibi, who is the head of the NPA, together with the minister and the president, have a mountain to climb to rebuild the credibility of IDAC and, of course, the overall NPA. And it's a very significant damage, precisely because before our courts today, there are several cases that have been tabled by IDAC on matters arising from the Zondo Commission and several others, because the mandate is very clear to investigate and prosecute some serious crimes. And there are very serious crimes that are before court that the IDAC was challenging. I do not expect that those who have been taken to the courts by IDAC, that they will sit back and not use this new opening as a way of wanting to weaken or challenge the cases before them. So there's great possibilities. It will not end with the saga in the crime intelligence itself, which is why, therefore, we must worry about the wider implications of what has occurred, other than just narrowly cases related to crime intelligence.
Operationally, then, what do you think that means for IDAC in terms of current cases on the agenda?
Look, this is devastating for a number of reasons, one of them being the fact that in terms of what we have heard in the testimony, it wasn't just only one investigating officer as well as the director of IDAC. There are several other names that were mentioned of official senior investigators working within IDAC. It becomes very difficult for them to be in court today and tomorrow pursuing certain cases when in fact their names have been linked to some of these issues that have arisen before. So most definitely this will be a dampener of spirit. It will create and cause a lot of uncertainty within the organization. It will mean that the NDPP may have to do some review of who's working on what case and what they are presenting in court. It has a major impact on the case management system within IDAC itself. And remember, as I've said, there are people who have cases that the IDAC has presented before court, and those people will use this opportunity that has arisen as part of their own defense when they go to court to say the processes are unfair, they are politically motivated, and so on. So the implications are just wider than what will eventually happen in relation to crime intelligence.
And one of those implications is the impact on influence when it comes to investment decisions.
Oh, yeah, because, these things send signals. The rule of law is very important. In any democracies, particularly in South African democracy, we have seen that when institutions go under severe strain, institutions in the criminal justice system, especially the prosecution and the judiciary, have tended to be the kind of the vanguard of the democratic project, as it were. And to the extent that you then see some kind of revelations like these ones, it sends a signal of whether or not you can trust that those who are handling cases from a prosecution point of view, they can do their work without fear or favor, whether they can prosecute cases effectively. Because you can imagine that if this was a commercial dispute and the revelations that have occurred, therefore, are linked to some of these shenanigans, of course you will think twice about it. The rule of law is very important in any society. In fact, even regardless of a political arrangement, we have the constitutional court. It works. The court of our country, the judiciary, it works and depends on the efficiency of the prosecutors and the prosecuting authority. I mean, we know the case of the Reverend in Nelson Mandela Bay in Port Elizabeth, who won the case when there were rape allegations. The judgment there was scathing on the prosecuting authority because it said the prosecutors were ill-prepared and so on. Once you have things like those, it has a major impact on how we view the criminal justice system, how we view the prosecuting authority, and how we view the possibilities of the outcome in court, because it means there are people who may walk, not because they did not commit a particular crime, but they may walk because the prosecutors were sleeping on the job.
So critically moving forward then, and this is a last question to you, critical that IDAC has got to deliver strongly over the next 12 months or so to prove that this resignation has strengthened the institution rather than weakening it. And that, I would suggest to you, is going to be difficult.
It is going to be difficult. The NDPP, in my view, has got to spend the next 12 months or so, and even more, building or rebuilding the institution from ground up. It is very important that the most junior prosecutors somewhere in Thohoyandou today must know that I'm working for an institution that is on the path of rebuilding, up to the most senior, provincial director and what have you. Because that sends a signal that says there are opportunities for them to advance their skills and their careers. There are possibilities that when they bring cases before court, that there will be no interference. And they also send a message that they will be given sufficient resources for them to prosecute crime, as small or big as those may be. So the rebuilding of an institution is an effort that needs to be put in place. There has to be resources for doing it so that we have the best prosecuting authority, in Africa or in the global south and so on. And you don't do that by prayer. You do that by effort, by building blocks over time, painstakingly, to make sure that we have the best prosecutors in the Republic.
Dr. Busani Ngqaweni, thank you very much indeed, Director of the Centre for Public Policy and African Studies at the Johannesburg Business School.
You're listening to Moneyweb at Midday.
South Africa, you would have read, has a new blueprint to tackle its worsening water crisis, with President Ramaphosa promising an Eskom-style intervention to stabilise failing municipal systems, attract private investment and hold officials accountable. The National Water Action Plan, as I understand it, identifies poor management, weak revenue collection, neglected infrastructure and a shortage of technical skills as key causes of repeated outages. But here's my question. Can another government plan translate into water flowing reliably from the taps? Someone who has their finger on the pulse of this particular issue is Benoit Leroy, who's Chief Executive Officer of the organisation Water Ledger South Africa. Benoit, welcome to you. So, genuinely, is this a credible rescue plan, or have we heard many of these promises before?
So, genuinely, and I take your earlier point, very, very well and agree with it. Generally, it's an amalgamation or a consolidation of the plans that have been in motion for the last 5-6 years, but haven't been able to produce the outcomes. And so by putting it into the presidency, I think it's clearer oversight. It's also admittance of guilt that the issues are very serious, especially at municipal level, and need to be addressed. And the legislation is in Parliament to address the Water Services Act issues, so licensing, etc. So there are things that have been happening irrespective. I think this is to bring it to the fore, to actually show that something's happening, but also there could be constitutional changes to bring local government, let's say, out of its totally independent status that it actually has. There's a lot of money available from the private sector, and one of its biggest things has been, and this is a message we see has been accepted, is that without ring-fencing revenues, we cannot be sure of getting paid for the services that we and the funding and institutional capacity building want to bring into the sector. So, and that's happening in the Metro Trading Services reform as we speak. It's actually in action.
I take your point about better oversight as far as this is concerned, but you'll agree with me that we need a lot more than just better oversight. It's actually rolling up one's sleeves and getting dirty and into the weeds of the problem, right? Where do you start?
So if you look at the Water Partnership Office, that's been put together between SALGA, South African Local Government Association, DBSA and the Department of Water and Sanitation, to sort of emulate the IPP office, Independent Power Producer, as an independent water producer, but totally in control of government. And that's to crowd in private sector funding and to actually do a lot of project preparation for things like non-revenue water, sewage upgrades, etc. So that's actually happening. It is staffed. That office is busy with compiling projects. You also got Infrastructure South Africa that's also putting projects together from a broad infrastructure base, including water. So these are actually starting to happen, and also grants are starting to become conditional now from Treasury through DWS for water, or in actual fact linked to terms and conditions. So we've seen some of the equitable share withheld, but also for the specific ones in water, they are also now being more strictly governed. So you will not get that money from the central fiscus if you don't adhere to certain KPIs. And those KPIs are, for example, you have to be a licensed water service provider now, and to keep that license. So these are real things that are actually happening. It's a matter of enforcing them and holding, local government accountable, which is a difficult part. And legislation is one thing, enforcing it, is another thing. So an independent water regulator is being put together. We lobbied for this nearly a decade ago. That is busy being constructed. The CMAs, we've got 6 instead of 9, and they are being staffed now and being put together. So there are some things happening, but they're not showing the results yet because it's very early stages yet, and that's the frustration.
And that is absolutely correct. How quickly could communities experiencing regular outages then expect to see practical improvements? This is not weeks or even months, is it?
No, I think the high road would be probably 2 to 3 years. to actually have the benefits of those interventions. I don't think it'll be before that because, the state procurement systems, which Water Partnership Office is trying to clean up, but the state procurement systems are actually quite lethargic. And that's because of institutional capacity issues. It's not because of legislation or supply chain management rules are incorrect. So those are being programmatically simplified in a way that's transparent and legal through the Water Partnership Office, for example, and through Infrastructure South Africa. So instead of 2 to 3 years to get a project awarded, it will now, the target is to do it within 10 to 12 months. And then we need another 12 to 24 months to actually, procure, put in place. So 2 to 3 years is the high road.
Is there a concern, a risk maybe, that private sector investment does solve the problem, but it also makes water more expensive for consumers?
So that's where the regulator comes in, and it's very important, is not only to give comfort to the private sector that it will get paid because funds are ring-fenced and the tariffs are adequate. If you look at the tariffs, generally speaking, why don't think they will go up or should go up? If you look at Cape Town's tariffs are slightly lower than the Gauteng metros, and they have per capita much more infrastructure to actually, they have 500 pump stations, nearly 3 times what Joburg has got. They've got the same kilometers for a third less population of water and sewage network, and for slightly lower price, they're able to actually render a reasonable service. It's not perfect, but a reasonable service. So I don't think it will put anything. It's a matter of using the money, more efficiently, and also using things like we call performance-based contracts. So where risk is shared by both the public and the private sector and rewarded accordingly, and working within those tariffs, because the tariffs are very politically charged. So increasing the tariffs more than inflation, at the moment they have to be below inflation, and I think that has to be done very hard.
Do you think the plan does enough to deal with leaks, illegal connections, and this enormous volume of treated water, Benoit, that simply never reaches paying customers?
Yes, the big thing is, and it's one of the first things, is to ring fence the funding so that, the 4 billion rand that was the 4.1 supposed to stay in Joburg Water, stays in Joburg Water and doesn't get swept or swiped out of it. That's important so that those revenues stay within the water system, water and waste, wastewater systems. I think that's really important because now you can start investing in the assets that you haven't been able to invest in, because it's a money thing, but also you've got to build up institutional capacity with the private sector, to do it together. What that will do in time will reinstate the assets, but also things like tanker mafia and construction mafia, they will just fall by the wayside because they're a symptom of the problems that we have. They just jump in because the system is not operating. So it's very important to put the money in the right place. And that ring fencing has been driven very hard by Treasury at the moment. And the metros are starting to toe the line.
But they've got to make sure that they continue to toe the line because revenue can be ring-fenced. I understand that, but many municipalities are already financially distressed. And the temptation then will be to move funds.
So with the technology we have these days, we're able, using things like distributed ledger technology, to hard code, through smart contracts, that those monies go into the right places. And this is used in the financial services sector, in the energy sector, etc. It's a matter of bringing it into the water sector now. So we're able to electronically govern this as opposed to manual transactions. And that will sort out the problem 100%. But it's a matter of having the right framework in place that technology can be put in. So the main bank account links straight to the electricity utility, to the water utility, to roads, etc. And Treasury is driving that, really hard. So the technology is not new, and it is tamper-proof.
Benoit Leroy, thank you very much indeed. You are the Chief Executive Officer of Water Ledger South Africa. I do appreciate your time.
Moneyweb at midday for all your up-to-date stories.
South African motorists are once again, I see, paying the price for a licensing system that appears unable to perform even its most basic functions. Johannesburg licensing centres have reportedly run out of the secure paper needed to print vehicle license discs and registration documents, while motorists continue to battle long queues, unreliable online systems and repeated service interruptions. Government is promising, it says, greater digitization, but why is a modern licensing network still being brought to a halt by paper shortages and aging technology? Let's turn our attention to Wayne Duvenhage, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. He is following this situation carefully. Wayne, how can a major city simply run out of paper required to issue vehicle licenses?
Yeah, look, the major city is running out of everything. Petrol and so on. So yeah, this is just bad planning. Why? It's these specialized papers. It has to be ordered. You have to plan for this. And it's not like they didn't know that they were running out of paper. It's not like they don't know how many people are coming to have their licenses done and renewed. And so this is just sheer incompetence, quite frankly.
And the way I see it is it's not necessarily an isolated problem as far as Johannesburg is concerned, but probably a symptom of a wider national dysfunction. The problem's been brought to the fore here in Johannesburg, but there are wider repercussions and implications, I imagine.
Yeah, there are. I mean, Jeremy, people plan their days. They take time off work to go and get these licenses done. It takes a long time. It's a hell of an effort to get there and then be told that, we've run out of paper. Basic stuff is just unacceptable. And as you were saying, we should have been far ahead of where we are, modernizing the whole licensing system, which should be digitized by now on your phones. We're still running very old systems. I don't know why the Department of Transport is just not getting their act together, getting all of this coordinated properly so that we can move into the new age of technology. We are so far behind.
Do you have a concern that the licensing system as it stands right now, Wayne, maybe creates opportunities for corruption and even middlemen because the official process is working so poorly? Surely this is open to corruption.
Certainly is, absolutely. And that's what we get a sense of so often, is people don't want to modernize, people don't want to digitize. I mean, you could have the whole driver's license prevent corruption, but it seems like there's a lack of a desire to do so. And so we keep suffering the consequences, the people.
On a practical level, do you have any advice as to what kind of proof people should keep if they have tried unsuccessfully to renew their licenses? How do you mitigate?
Well, it's very difficult to have proof other than try and photograph that you were there, but no police officer is going to do anything about that and say, you have tried, so please be lenient with me. You do have 3 months of your license expiring to be replaced. I just think you've got to go ahead of time, 2-3 months before. You can't go earlier than 3 months, I think, and just go putting them under pressure. But what we've got to do as society is keep putting government under pressure to modernize and to get up to speed and not allow these problems happening.
And when that happens, government comes back and says it is considering replacing physical licenses with or license discs with electronic verification. But again, one's got to ask the question, is the country technically ready for that? Probably not.
Yeah, it is. It should have gone there some time ago. In fact, we did a whole a presentation to the department to push the license renewal period out to 10 years so that it reduces the pressure on the licensing department by half, by the way. We did the research. We've right back when Fikile and Belula were still going to do it. Then we found out they had already approved it in 2013 and they rescinded that decision. They are really all over the place. Now Minister Creasy has said, they've looked at it, they're going to go to 8 years. This was long. And here we sit and we're saying, well, why are you procrastinating? 8 is not quite 10 years, but it's a lot better than 5 years. That would ease a lot of pressure, all of this nonsense. So they make a decision, but they just I don't know, like rabbits in the headlight, deer in the headlight, just stuck. They cannot proceed with the decision they've already agreed to.
So who's ultimately accountable when licensing centres can't provide these basic services?
Well, the Department of Transport is ultimately responsible. They will blame the provinces, like when we pointed out all the vehicle testing corruption was happening. They blamed the provinces. We said, but you have the national mandate for road safety. If vehicles are unroadworthy, you've got to oversee this. And then on this issue, they'll blame the licensing centre for not ordering on time, or the city of Joburg for not having money to pay for the paper. It just points to everybody else. But if you're the Minister of Transport, this ultimately sits with you. You need to get everybody into the room and say, this is grossly unacceptable, from the provincials down to the local government, and say, fix your nonsense. If you're not ordering on time, and you could, by the way, you could automate that whole ordering system. How many licenses have been issued? How much paper you've got? It's not difficult. It's not rocket science, this, Jeremy. It's just a lack of will and competence. And we keep saying so many problems exist because the wrong people in the positions, because it's a cadre deployment issue, I think.
Lack of will and competence, Wayne Duvenage, but is it also a lack of money? Does the funding exist to fix this?
Yeah, look, I believe we have enough money in this country to fix anything. If every rand was spent where it should be spent, then we've got the funds. It's just that too much money goes missing for the wrong reasons. And as we were saying earlier on, corruption is probably the reason why they run out of money, because they're not spending it in the right areas.
So just a final one then. Apart from the minister calling everyone into a room to crack the whip, what other immediate intervention do you think the transport authorities need to make clear as far as this current disruption is concerned? Or do Johannesburgers simply have to live with the problem?
Well, we shouldn't have to live with the problem. So the authorities in the Department of Transport in Joburg that make sure that run the license need to have the paper ordered. They what they should have done just happened yesterday. It's been going on for some time. They should have rushed off to where they have to go and get this paper and get it delivered. Now you'll have a courier problem or a back order problem. It really isn't difficult. Whoever's in charge of transport in the city must take responsibility, but so should the MEC for Transport in Gauteng, who should be visiting the next day when they see that type of...
Yeah.
This is basic errors. Should have got involved. The minister should have got involved, because it's not like they don't know about it. They all know about it. And this is the biggest city. So when people in Joburg start queuing up and be run out of paper, it really is a problem.
Wayne Duvenage, thank you very much indeed. Chief Executive Officer of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse.
Moneyweb at midday for all your up-to-date stories.
Now, it's common cause, I think, that South Africa desperately needs engineers, accountants, artisans and technology specialists. Yet thousands of locally qualified graduates simply cannot enter the job market because universities are withholding their certificates over unpaid fees. The institutions argue that they need to recover billions of rand in student debt. Critics say the policy traps graduates in unemployment and makes repayment even less likely. So let's get our heads around this particular issue. I'm going to talk to Spiwi Masuku, who is head of marketing at the education finance provider Fundi, who's done some work on this. So Spiwi, a very warm welcome. Why should a graduate then who's earned a qualification be denied the document needed to find work? I understand the debt equation, but it does seem in many respects unfair, but a difficult conundrum.
So what you just said now is actually the reality that most of us and the students are facing. Universities are doing that in light of them wanting to recover what's owed to them so that they can also stay afloat. But the irony of that is that the same qualifications that they are withholding for the students to go into the job market are a reason why they will not be able to recover the money, because they aren't able to secure any employment so that they can pay back.
And the difficulty here is that every single year we have more graduates, which means the problem, no doubt, is compounding.
Definitely it is. Looking into the TVET space, we are looking at a few TVETs, including University of Pretoria, Tshwane University, And what we're looking at from that institution alone, we are looking at over 24,000 graduate degree certificates that are being withheld. Moving into other spaces such as DUT, Durban University of Technology, we are looking at another 23,000 that is being withheld. That already can show you how the problem is already growing in the market.
Is there clear evidence then that graduates with withheld certificates are actually being excluded from jobs?
There is evidence because if you think about it and take it to an employer level, if you are claiming on your CV that you are a graduate in human resources, you need to prove that you are. So this means that you need to provide a certificate to validate your case.
Are employers able to verify qualifications directly with universities without seeing the physical certificate? Would that be a workaround?
So some of them can, especially in a digital age. Some corporates are able to view the certificates, but we still have some that aren't able to providing that capability for employers to view.
Your argument, or Fundi's argument, is that South Africa then is importing skills while local graduates remain locked out. I guess the question, though, is those graduates that are being imported, are they qualified in the same scarce fields?
Correct. So if you're looking at South Africa alone, we have a gap in terms of, in the engineering space. We previously were looking at about 10% shortage, and now we're looking at an escalated number of 22%. This means that we have graduates in that space, in the engineering space, that are graduating, or rather, they are completing their degrees. However, they aren't able to be placed. Now, the resolution for employers is to actually outsource in places where they are able to close the gaps in their own respective companies.
How many of the withheld qualifications go beyond engineering? There are other critical skills categories, I imagine, to which the same problem applies.
Correct. So if you look at, in a nutshell, we're also looking into the education space. When you look at the education space as well, we do have graduates that are qualifying to be on the ground. However, they are unable to do that. And we also have a crisis also where our own graduates in that space are actually going abroad so that they can provide their services.
So you've outlined a very real problem. As far as your company is concerned, you offer loans to settle outstanding balances. I understand that. But are you highlighting a national crisis here or selling a commercial solution?
So we are highlighting a national crisis here. It's 3 decades now we've been in the business of operating in the education space. And not only are we offering loans for students to settle their outstanding balances, we also are building a universe where students are able to access everything that is relating to their studies. Here we're looking at about Fundi Health, a healthcare facility. We're looking at Fundi Mobile to connect them in terms of data. We are looking at Fundi Connect, that is more of a platform for them to access any information required for higher education and more.
I understand that you run a business and that you have a bottom line to manage, but how do you prevent a graduate who is already indebted from simply taking on another unaffordable loan?
So what happens is obviously with our students, they have to find out first how much they are owing. And if the loan route is also not a feasible route for them, we also have alternative structures that they can converse with the universities to offer them a way where they can settle as little bit as they can. But in addition to that, we have a Fundi Foundation that was established a couple of years ago. From the foundation, it is not a profitable business. What we do and are also launching very soon as a campaign that settles outstanding balances for our students, because we are moving away from registration that was granting them access. Outstanding balances proved for them to go into the employment space.
Do you think the real problem, though, is withheld certificates or potentially a deeper mismatch between graduate qualifications and available jobs?
So one can argue that it's correct that there's a mismatch. But when you are looking at the statistics that we have, already in the engineering space, we do have our graduations that are sitting at home or taking on a part-time job somewhere because they need to prove themselves that they are able and they are capable to take on the challenge and go into the workforce.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Spiwe Masuku, who is Head of Marketing at the education finance provider Fundi. I appreciate your time. Thank you. And that is our program for today. You've been listening to Moneyweb at midday, and we are here every weekday at noon with the latest in current affairs, the economy and policy. You can always catch the podcast version a little later. Thank you for making us part of your day. Until next time, goodbye.
Listen to the daily live stream of Moneyweb at midday or download episodes on moneyweb.co.za, the Moneyweb app, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or follow Moneyweb News on social media for more updates. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.